Welcome to Sports Spectrum, the sports and faith podcast that brings Jesus back into the conversation. Here's your host, Jason Romano.
Hey guys, welcome to the show. I am Jason Romano. This is Sports Spectrum. Our email address, jason@sportspectrum.com, jason@sportspectrum.com, and definitely go check out our website, sportsspectrum.com. And we are presented today by IJM, the International Justice Mission, helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. And that violence is really, it's expanding, we'll say, due to COVID-19 and the coronavirus, and they need help. And this is a chance for you to learn about that help that is needed by going to their website, ijm.org/TF, and learn how you can become a Freedom Partner today. We're also presented by Compassion International, the most trusted child development ministry in the world. And they got something great going on right now, helping to release children from poverty. It's part of their Team Up initiative. And you can learn more about it by going to that website, compassion.com/teamup, and an opportunity for you to release a child from poverty. Again, kids, this COVID-19 thing is affecting these kids that are in poverty right now. More sickness than you can imagine, parents not working, food being scarce. This is the time to act. Go check out the website, compassion.com/teamup, and donate and help join the fight to release children from poverty today. Really excited to welcome Bob Sturm today to Sports Spectrum. He is a sports talk show host for Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket in Dallas, Texas. He's been there since 1998. He's part of a show called The Hard Line that airs weekdays from 3 to 7 p.m. Central in Dallas and can be heard online at theticket.com. But this is a conversation with Bob about certainly faith and the pandemic, and sports talk radio discussion right now is a little weird and a little crazy and a little strange with the pandemic, but the Dallas Cowboys are certainly the team that dominate the conversation, and with NFL draft and the offseason, that's helped keep the conversations going. But even more than that, we talk about what he's learned from God during this time away in the quarantine life that we've all been living in. And then a time came for Bob in 2005. He had gone to Liberty College and Liberty University and then got into this broadcasting thing. But a poignant moment happened in 2005 where he discovered his true purpose, which leads to a missions trip to Guatemala, and then eventually an amazing adoption story. You're going to like getting to know Bob Sturm from Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket in Dallas, joining us here today on Sports Spectrum. Bob Sturm, welcome to Sports Spectrum.
Jason, great to see you again, my man. How's it going?
Yeah, it's good to see you too. And full disclosure here for people, we actually taped an interview previously, and we did it before the pandemic, actually before the Super Bowl. And when the pandemic hit, a lot of things changed. So I thought, let's get Bob back on. Let's redo the interview and kind of make it more current, because it would sound a little weird if we were just talking about, the Dallas Cowboys and, Mike McCarthy. And a lot has happened since then. And you and I actually saw each other, randomly ran into each other, which I thought was pretty cool, in Miami at the Super Bowl. And that was some fun times too. But this is really a unique time in probably both of our lives. What has this been like for you, this whole pandemic, and just now we're, almost 2 months into it. What's this been like?
Well, it's been a blur, of course. So many of us, we're all kind of experiencing the same thing. So on one respect, it's you're in the house, you're spending absurd amounts of time with the family, which is great, obviously, because in the normal blur of life, there's no doubt about it that the family time is actually something you have to make time for, or it just doesn't happen organically. So that's been great. We actually have a real rhythm to our day now, which is kind of funny, because clearly everyone was stir crazy, and now they're past stir crazy, and now this is just like the new normal. But for me, it was a kind of a career altering situation before that, with just the radio show. I had been lucky enough to be on the same show for 21 years, which usually doesn't happen in this business, and on a station for 22 years. And because of the retirement of kind of the founder of the place, Mike Reiner, the great icon in Dallas radio, he retired around New Year's Day without just a whole lot of notice. And so it set off a domino effect at our radio station, which for me was kind of actually moving over to his chair, and great honor, great responsibility, but also new teammates, leaving old teammates behind. But at the same time, you talk to them every day because you're still mixing with them from noon to 3 and 3 to 7. So the whole thing is just trying to find your footing again, trying to feel as self. I suppose that's even a poor term, but as secure in your own skin as you felt like 3 months ago. And I since we're all dealing with this at the same time, I suppose it's normal, but it's just part of another turn in the road in life, right?
Absolutely. And I got to imagine talk radio. Thankfully, you have the Cowboys, which is usually the topic that dominates your airwaves, I'm sure, anyways. But then you have the draft. So the NFL draft has got to be a godsend for talk radio hosts, because when there's no sports, what are you talking about every day? It kind of probably feels like Groundhog Day a lot of times on the air, right?
Yeah, it does. It does. But you know what? It's kind of been fun from that standpoint, because I, by definition, am a sports nerd. And I love the history, and there's so many projects that both on the radio show or for my writing or whatever, that I'm like, doggone, I'd always like to go back and take a look at this game or look at this game. And now I have a perfect excuse for it. So it's not the same, of course. One of the great parts about sports is when you sit down, you don't know what's going to happen. And so when you're watching something that you know what's going to happen, that changes the dynamic, and you have to stay engaged. But I think the shows have been way different, but I still think they've been fun and hopefully enjoyable to listen to, just simply because there are so many fun roads back. I mean, the Last Dance documentary is a great example of just how rich history is. And honestly, Jason, how old we're getting, because there's so many people in our audience that Michael Jordan is no more real to them than like Superman. It's a character, it's a comic book, it's a doll or an action figure they were given as a kid. So they're learning a lot of these stories for the first time, and it's kind of fun if you're kind of a sports historian or nerd or whatever you want to call me. I live for that stuff, and so. Whether it's an old Tony Romo story or an old Michael Jordan story or something in between, it's fun to go back.
Yeah, even the other night, as we tape this, it's right before the first part of May, they were showing the Cowboys-Bills game on ESPN from 2007. And to me, that 2007 team, we could do this for hours, was one of the best Cowboy teams ever that didn't really even have a lot of playoff success or even make it to a Super Bowl. I just thought they were stacked on both sides. And rewatching that game, that was interesting that they chose that game, and I understand why, because it was a Monday night game. Right. But they should never have won that game. But it was fun to watch in their sort of wheelhouse prime. I think you tweeted about this too, about that defense and how stacked it was. Yeah. That's fun to go back and watch. And even somebody who's 25 right now, they were 12 then, so they don't even remember, a lot about those times.
Yeah, and our memories, whether it's our favorite team or our favorite athlete or even our experience in high school, our memory picks up 3 or 4 things, and it just kind of misrepresents reality. Now it's probably a coping mechanism in many respects, but we did an hour on that game yesterday. I mean, who would have thought a Week 5 game in Buffalo in 2007 would help us fill an hour in Dallas in 2020? But it's been that kind of year,
Yeah, that's it. Exactly. Bob Sturm is our guest here on Sports Spectrum, Sports Radio 1310, The Ticket out there in Dallas, Texas. Let's learn about your faith a little bit. And maybe before you share your journey to faith, what the Lord is maybe showing you during this time. I mean, for all of us, I think, especially those as believers, my prayer, my hope is that I do not turn out the same person that I was before the pandemic. That's kind of been my prayer. And, there's times when I feel like, Okay, I feel like this is the same. But that's been my hope and my prayer. What's the Lord been showing you, maybe from a spiritual perspective, during this quarantine time?
Well, I think a lot of things. Probably the best one is that I'm actually getting a little time to dive in, do some things along those lines. There's a unbelievable study of James that I've been able to kind of work into my life a little bit more, because unfortunately my to-do list is such that the optional things get pushed off, and too often I make that sort of thing optional, which I should not. But now the gift of time, even the simple thing of golf courses being closed, have encouraged me to know, you know what, you could probably do something better than losing a sleeve of golf balls today. So diving into that sort of thing has been great. My wife and I teach a 8th grade grow group at our church. So we have a bunch of 8th graders, and now they're on Zoom, and so we have our class on Zoom, like I'm sure all people across the country are figuring out. But it's just it's the idea that you work on, or you absorb the lesson, and then you relay it to 8th graders who may or may not want to be on the Zoom call in the middle of their free time. On for us, it's Sunday afternoon at 2:00. We do that sort of thing. But the thing that has struck me is so often those lessons kind of hit me, and the one just from a couple of weeks ago that has stuck with me is just the idea of kind of the view that the Lord has on our lives. And there's so many twists in the road, so many unforeseen things, and the 30,000 foot view that the Lord has versus us trying to navigate through a windy street where we can't see what's around the next turn. It was profound. And some of the passages that go with that, and the simple idea that he is directing our paths if we allow him to. And, I think a lot of that is important as we try to relay it to our teenagers. But at the same time, we always find that it relays best to us as the teacher is taught perhaps more than the students sometimes.
We'll get back to our conversation with Bob Sturm in just a little bit, but want to tell you a little bit more about our friends at IJM, International Justice Mission, helping to protect more than 150 million people from violence worldwide. This is important work right now, especially with COVID-19. It's really hit this area hard for people who are stuck in violence, hunger, disease, homelessness. It's a part of daily life for so many people who are poor, and it's often overlooked, but not by IJM. They believe every person deserves to be safe and free from violence. We believe that as well. It's why they help to protect, like I said, more than 150 million people from this violence, but it's work that they cannot do alone. They need your help. They need our help. These freedom partners are a great way, some of IJM's most loyal partners in the work of justice, to join the fight to end slavery. The support is about $24 or more each month, tax deductible, helping survivors of slavery and violence from the moment they're rescued until they are fully restored. Check out the website ijm.org/TF to become a freedom partner. Join the fight to end slavery in our lifetime. We're also presented by Compassion International today. And when I think about Compassion, we talk about them a lot here on the podcast. The most trusted child development ministry in the world. And this slogan, this sort of line that we use, releasing children from poverty in Jesus' name. That's what Compassion is about. But COVID-19 has left nearly 70,000 children without a sponsor. And think about that. That's the capacity of an average NFL stadium. So as the world is in the grips of COVID-19, it's led to more sickness. Parents can't work. Food is scarce. And the frontline churches of Compassion and their partners around the world are courageously delivering essential items to desperate children and families, often door to door. So Compassion and some of our pro athlete friends have teamed up to respond to this challenge and want to invite you to respond as well, to team up with Compassion and these pro athletes to help fill the stadium. Here's how it works. You go to compassion.com/teamup and you make a donation. It could be a 1-month donation. It could be a year donation. Every single donation helps to fill a seat toward a year of needed funding to help these children, these 70,000 children, that we're going to go without a sponsorship because of COVID-19. Check out the website to learn more, compassion.com/teamup, and pray about donating and helping to release a child from poverty today. Now back to our conversation with Bob Sturm from Sports Radio 1310 The Ticket here on Sports Spectrum. Let me ask you about your faith and kind of where it took shape. I know you went to Liberty, and I'm sure that had a profound impact on your life. Grew up in a Christian home. Tell us about all that.
Yeah, a very conservative home, and that's important to my story because I really have been fortunate enough to work in my hobby. I've never feel like I've really worked a day in my life just because I pursued a career in sports because of the way I was raised. And the reason I say that is at a very early age in the late 70s, my parents were one of many conservative families that thought the TV was probably the path to destruction for all of us. And so they put some very strict television rules on. Now, they didn't get rid of the TV, but they put it in the closet and said, this can come out when sports are on. And I'm 5, so what do I know? But I quickly put 2 and 2 together that the key to getting to the TV was showing an interest in sports. And the next thing you know, sports has pretty much been everything I've cared about ever since then. So I like to say they created a bit of a sports Frankenstein themselves by unintended ramifications, I suppose, of trying to keep stuff out of their home that they wanted out of their home. And so that started with the NFL, but then quickly to, the NBA and Major League Baseball and then the NHL. And I just never really stopped. So, that upbringing, very conservative Christian school as well, with the dress code all the way through 12th grade. And then when I went to Liberty, that was actually seen as a bit of a liberal move, really. People don't ever consider Liberty a little left of what they're thinking, but that's kind of where I came from. Was we have some Bible colleges that would absolutely be more of your liking, and I wanted to try to play Division I basketball. Now, I will tell you, Jason, I was not successful in playing Division I basketball, as I quickly found out that being a Christian school basketball star in rural Wisconsin is a little different than defending anyone at the Division I level, and I could not guard anybody. So I quickly moved to the media side. But as far as my faith and as far as that journey, I think like a lot of people with my background, there is a distinction between your parents' faith and you trying to, color inside the lines so you don't get in trouble versus something that really resonates with you. And I think that took me some time to kind of differentiate what are the rules versus what do I actually believe. And I think so many people have unbelievable stories of just their journey and just trials and tribulations, whereas mine, it was really just a deal of how important is this to you, how authentic is it to you. And so the Lord blessed me at every turn. I was hired 4 days before I graduated to do talk radio. So I'm 21 years old and I'm doing talk radio in Lynchburg, Virginia. And then 4 years later, I get hired to Dallas, and the journey's just been great. But I always think during that time that I quickly lost sight of, is it me doing all this, and therefore do I need to protect it, or is the Lord opening doors for me? And I think that took me into my early 30s, honestly, where I kind of felt like I had maybe 2 lives. I had the life that's in church every Sunday, and then I had the life that is out there trying to make it in the secular sports media world. And I think that caused me to kind of lose focus for a long time on kind of protecting my turf, kind of feeling like, okay, I got here and I can't screw this up. And one way to screw this up is to turn everybody off by being, quote, the Bible thumper or anything like that. And so it was, it's funny what sort of touches your heart. But honestly, this little light of mine, where you're hiding it under the bushel, you're hiding your light, that was me. And so for so many years, the Lord's put me in this place in Dallas, and probably until about 2005. my biggest goal was hiding that light under the bushel so that nobody in the sports world thought I was one of them. But then on Sunday, I'm re-energizing my relationship with God, and it's just a weekly cycle that goes on for years.
Oh yeah.
And so it feels like this hollow existence a little bit, partly because I know better, partly because my brother is in the ministry to this day as a Army chaplain and as a pastor down in North Carolina. And so, we have the same skill set. We have the same voice and love for debate and encyclopedia, in our head, and just all these things. We have the same gifts. And I'm doing sports talk and, juvenile radio, as I'm definitely a part of every day. And he's, in Baghdad ministering to soldiers. And so I kind of felt a little bit of, maybe this isn't what life was intended to be. It felt empty. It felt a little bit, the idea of getting to success and what you tell yourself when you're 20 is, boy, if I can ever do this, I promise I'll be happy. I promise there's nothing else. And then you get there and you're like, so this is what I wanted so much. It doesn't really feel like what I'm supposed to be here for. Yeah. And so, the long story would basically take me to church in 2005. And after, an epiphany and driving into work one day, just thinking, man, there must be more. And then that Sunday, which I don't think is a coincidence, my church had a missions Sunday, which I have ignored for years, Jason. I mean, you walk through the lobby and there's a bunch of tables with different mission fields, out there, and you're like, yeah. Okay, well, this is probably for somebody else. And that Sunday, I actually, I felt that it was for me, and it turned into a trip to Guatemala with some guys from my church, and they'd say, "Trust me, you can do this." And I'm like, I don't know if I have time in my schedule. It's football season. If you just go with us, it's a 2-hour flight. It's the same length of a flight from Dallas to Chicago as it is to Guatemala City. We'll take you on a Wednesday night. We'll have you back before kickoff on Sunday. You'll be fine, and it will change your life. And it did. It absolutely changed my life because I, first of all, had never really seen, poverty. I thought I had, but I'd never really seen, a orphanage in the middle of a junkyard, which is exactly where I went in Guatemala City. It was an old, what was a prison turned into San Gabriel orphanage. It was just unbelievable. And just to see the next 4 days was such a sensory overload and just taught me that there's so much out in this world that certainly the Mavericks, free agent pursuits, that's not, the overall point to what, you're on this earth, if the Lord's blessed you like this. So that turned into a half dozen mission trips, which turned into maybe a half dozen more. And on one of those, I took my wife and that's when the Lord started working on us about adoption. And the fifth member of our family was from a Honduran family and an orphanage there. And so our little guy, Justin, joined our family in 2011. And that was kind of its own mission trip where we lived in Tegucigalpa, Honduras for 40 days. And my radio station here was kind enough to, just tell me to take as long as I need to go do that and take our family down to Honduras. And so I realize this has been an awful long answer, but I feel like that trip into work in 2005, where I was kind of trying to figure out what the point to all this was a push into action of, hey, I gave you this platform. Let's do something with it. And for me, all that really means is just, be one person. Don't have two lives. But be the same guy every day. Now, some people that will turn them off, but for most people, they'll see an authentic version of somebody trying to, follow the calling and leave the world a better place and teach your kids, the purpose. And far, far, far from perfect, but it feels way more fulfilling to just sort of not hide it under the bushel, I guess, just to go back to this little Light of Mine song I was taught when I was 4 years old. It actually flipped a switch for me when I was 33 or so.
I love that. And please, this is a podcast, so you can go as long as you want on any answer, Bob. That's fine. It may be different in doing a radio show. I know that you got to hit the break and you got to pay the bills, but thank you for that. And thank you for sharing that story. I wonder what adoption has done for you in your journey. You talked about how you were kind of finding your purpose, right? What was the real purpose that the Lord had for you? And then adoption comes along. And I think adoption is such a beautiful picture of the gospel. I really do. And the idea of who Christ is and the Father kind of adopting all of us as his sons and daughters. What is that journey of adoption kind of revealed to you on this journey of faith that you've been on?
Well, so many things I would think. Probably the easiest one is just that the Lord puts us all in different spots for different reasons, and we have no idea what those are. So I say that because one of the things about the adoption that was really interesting to me, and really even the mission trips before that, was just showing a willingness to open up about my experiences. So I didn't think I had experiences worth sharing, to be honest, at the time, for sure. Yeah. And so I think and because those of us, and this from your career as well, some of our platforms are open doors for us to say something, and other platforms, that's really not what they want us to do right now. It's like, hey, Bob, I'm sure you got a great personal story here, but let's actually talk about the draft if you don't mind, that sort of thing. So obviously it's a pick and choose your spots thing. But I was under the impression, Jason, that if I spoke about my mission trips or ultimately the adoption process or whatever was on my heart, that the bosses would run down the hall, yank me off the air, and certainly fire me immediately. And that is probably just the thoughts that the little devil on our shoulder, I guess, that talks us out of doing things, talks us out of making ourselves available. And so as I look back at it, it was really kind of a, hey, be willing to tell your story. And it doesn't have to be anything, that is going to require, a 5-page outline or anything like that. It's just like, look, I spent the weekend in Guatemala City, and I met this kid, and this is an amazing story. I just want to tell you this, and then we'll get back to the Cowboys in 10 minutes or something like that. And once I was willing to do that, the response, both internally and externally, from people inside the radio station and people obviously hearing it through the speakers, it stayed with them so much more than anything I could ever say about Jason Witten or Quincy Carter or whatever whatever the topic of the day is. People don't remember 99% of our sports opinions, but they do remember our personal stories we share with them. And so as it pertains specifically to the adoption and your question, just talking about, and obviously people notice when you're gone for 40 days, thank goodness. If they don't notice you're gone for 40 days, then you're about to be fired anyway.
That's a problem. That's right.
Yes, it is. But I was gone for 6 weeks in 2011. So the Super Bowl was in Dallas in 2011 with my hometown team in Dallas winning the Super Bowl, and then the Mavs go to the NBA Finals. And I actually write a book about that. And then right after that is when we got the call from Honduras that everything has been approved for you to go pick up Justin, who was 4 at the time. And so that little window between the Mavs and the NBA Finals, me finishing up this really quickly written book, and then the Rangers actually going to the 2011 World Series, which obviously DFW people don't like to talk about the ending, but there was that window in between where I was gone for 6 weeks from basically week one of the Cowboys season where they lost at the Jets all the way till basically Texas OU. That's that 6-week window. I was gone. And so I'm calling in periodically, and because my show wanted to know how I was doing down in Honduras, and, the crazy stories there. And, first of all, we have a little one in our family now who doesn't speak English yet, and just all these crazy things. And, we're talking about it on the air. And anyway, what was crazy about that is I have heard, and I don't know what the number is, the Lord does, but I don't. But I have heard from so many people that were inspired to look into adoption and ultimately to participate in adoption because I guess our story perhaps, nudged them a little bit. So I don't want to say it absolutely was the reason they did it, but maybe they were at a, hey, maybe, and the Sturm story pushed them over the top. So, that is kind of the external result. Obviously, internally, we have an amazing member of our family that we weren't planning on, being part of our plan. We had a plan, I guess, and it was 2 kids and we're good. The Lord said, no, I kind of got a third for you that you will find out about, many, many years later. And it's been great. It wasn't, not everything was simple. Not everything was easy. Nothing is. And I don't want to make anybody think that adoption, and especially international adoptions, is just like grabbing a magazine at the grocery store at the checkout counter. It's not that at all. You better really consider all the things that go into it, because it is a process for sure and a journey. But for us, I wouldn't change a single thing about that. And again, for all the people that hear what the Lord laid on your heart, I mean, the fact is, I didn't know. I mean, that's what I'm trying to get to, is I had no idea what was around the next corner. But I think the idea that he was trying to teach me back in 2005 was, hey, just keep an open mind to what I'm about to show you, that sort of thing. And so I think before that, I probably wasn't willing to listen unless it was like Sunday morning when I had God time in my 2 different lives, 2 different existence sort of situation. So it all fits together for me, even if I'm not smooth at articulating it at all times, I suppose.
No, I think it's a great story, and I think it's a great platform, and the opportunity to share your story. If it can help one person, we have to share it. That's what I always tell people. You may think your platform's a certain size or you don't have a platform at all, but if your story can help someone, and those listening, I'm encouraging you, please do share it. It's important for you to share your story. Bob, let me ask you, as we wind down here, what this has been like for you these last few years. A lot of changes, you said, with your job, certainly at the Ticket, and being on air for many years. The Lord, I always think back to Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and it talks about trusting in the Lord with all of our heart, leaning not on our own understanding, but acknowledging him in all our ways, not just on Sundays, like you said, and he'll make our path straight. He'll direct our path. How have you seen that work? It sounds like you've seen it, but I'm really curious to hear you kind of break it down a little bit on how you've seen the Lord work a straight path in your life that probably sounds anything but straight.
Yeah. That's interesting because it definitely puts a lot of things into focus over the course of time, and just the way that your career and your faith and your family and just all this stuff fits together. And really for me, now that I have 3 teenagers in our family,
oh man,
it happens fast, and you're trying to instill in them something that it took you forever to figure out on your own. And that's the weird thing is just kind of patience for the process, because I want to fix things immediately. I don't want the sun to go down on any problems, and just sometimes you have to understand there's a level of patience that is required of a parent, of a husband, of just whatever. And I think the same is true in our careers, where you have an idea of what might happen, And I'll tell you, man, when I left school in 1994 in Central Virginia, I can tell you that I never thought I'd be covering the Dallas Cowboys, especially for what appears to be the rest of my life. I mean, this is going to be my 23rd season of covering the Cowboys, and I'll tell you, in Redskins country, and especially when the Cowboys are winning 3 Super Bowls in 4 years, God has a sense of humor. Let's just put it that way. Let's just put it that way. And the bane of my existence back then from a sports world, Jason, was Troy Aikman. And as you know, I've ended up now working for him for now 5 seasons for Fox. So I mean, it's crazy how the guy who haunted me back then is now a friend, and I prepare him for his Fox broadcast on the side a little bit. Not that he needs my help, but I add to his over preparation. I don't want to give anyone the wrong impression on that, but yeah. Just all there's a ministry that exists with my wife's encouragement. In fact, it's all my wife. She wanted us to go down to a ministry in Dallas called Cornerstone, and it turned into a clothing drive, and that is, I don't want to say 100%, mostly because of the listeners of our radio station who in some cases go to churches and care about the Lord. In some cases, they just care about helping people. So, there's a million different things the Lord has showed me in the last several years. And I will definitely try to succinctly say at the end, it just feels amazing to know that he knows our paths. He directs them if we allow him to, and he sees us from far above, and the map makes sense when you have that perspective. But when you're at ground level, when you're at sea level, a simple 8-foot wall can block our view on what's around the next corner, and the Lord sees it. So I definitely can speak for hours at a time, Jason, but occasionally I leave the exact question that you asked. So I will just say over these last several years, really what's about 15 years now, it's been amazing the doors that have opened and the blessings that have poured in. But I think the idea to it all is for me to have my ears and eyes open to what he's trying to show me on a regular basis.
He will do, they say, I think the word says this too, exceedingly and abundantly more than we could ever imagine. It sounds like he's done that with you, Bob Sturm.
Yes,
Sports
sir.
Radio 1310, The Ticket. The Hard Line is the show, 3 to 7 Central Time in Dallas. You can listen online at theticket.com if you're not in the Dallas area. And lots of good stuff there, Bob. Thank you so much for joining us. Thanks for sharing your story. All the best to you. And hopefully we'll talk again soon.
It's an honor to be on the show.
And many thanks to Bob Sturm from 1310 The Ticket in Dallas, joining us here today on the show. He's a lot of fun. He's got a great story, and he is a professional broadcaster, that guy. He knows how to tell a story. He knows how to answer a question, and this is a podcast. He can go as long as he wants. I thought he was fantastic. I love the story about discovering his true purpose in 2005 and kind of living a life that is on Sundays, church, and then the rest of the week focused on work and other things. And I can relate to that. I had that issue myself for many years during my time working at ESPN. I used to think that ESPN was not a place where I could bring my faith and be a Christian. And I realized, no, that's not how this whole journey with Jesus works. Jesus is with us everywhere we go. So if we go to the grocery store, if we go to the library, or we go to the post office, or we go to work, or we go home, or we go to church, God is with us. Jesus is with us in all of those places. And so we need to shine our light, like Bob said in that song, everywhere we go. And Bob is doing that now with his journey, both as a talk radio host in Dallas, but also as a man of God. Again, check out his show. It's 3 to 7 p.m. Central in Dallas live. It's called The Hard Line, and you can listen online at theticket.com, theticket.com. Thanks to Bob for joining us here today on the show. Also want to thank our sponsors, IJM, the International Justice Mission. Check them out at ijm.org/TF to become a Freedom Partner. And also Compassion International and the great work they're doing right now to help release children from poverty. Go to compassion.com/teamup. Compassion.com/teamup to learn how you can join the fight to end poverty and release these kids from poverty in Jesus' name. We love you guys. We're so glad that you tuned in. Make sure you tell your friends, tell your family to listen to this show, to download, subscribe to this show, that you never miss an episode of Sports Spectrum, and check out all of our content over at sportsspectrum.com. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next time right here on the show. I hope you all have a great rest of your day. This is Sports Spectrum. I am Jason Romano, and we'll see you soon.